In its propagandistic frenzy, Russia as a nation has completely lost its collective mind, if ever had it at all. Good afternoon, it's Henry Keane on UATV State Channel, breaking hard truth into easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Ukraine, Crucifixion, Tribunal. A new exhibition on Russian war crimes that opened a week ago on March 31st in New York featured a video speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and more than 1,000 museum artifacts of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The exhibition has been noticed worldwide.
People in the United States can now see the horrors that have been taking place in Ukraine. There's a new exhibit at the United Nations. The organizers tell us it contains a number of things collected from cities that were occupied by Russia during this war, including this green door from a small town north of Kyiv. This door was to a basement where Ukrainians had been locked up for days. And you can see that they had literally etched the dates of captivity into that wooden door. Of course, eventually, those people were freed.
Zelensky's speech was followed by remarks from other guests, including a former Ukrainian prisoner of war and medic, Yulia Payevska. The show is sponsored by the National Museum of the History of Ukraine in the Second World War and the Bogdan Gubsky Foundation. It has been held at 866 United Nations Plaza, right next to UN headquarters. The exhibition triggered a tornado effect also in Russia, twisting the Russian propaganda talking heads even more.
In New York, a Ukrainian exhibition has opened under the title Ukraine Crucifixion Tribunal. In this way, Ukraine is trying to persuade the West to organize a large tribunal for Russia.
Ukraine, with the help of America, opened an exhibition in New York where enlightened Western minds can admire what is left of our soldiers.
Pretendingly mournful faces, lies and deceit like everything they do, mysterious allusions to the cooperation of the West and the Ukraine, as if this is not yet obvious even without them for the whole world. And of course, not a word about what Russian soldiers are doing in Ukraine in the first place. This all is Russia today. Well, what could be added to it? Those who do not like that Russian soldiers are losing their shoes in Ukraine are more than welcome to walk in our Ukrainian shoes and experience what it feels like when a maddened by venomous propaganda horde invades your country, kills your men, rapes your women, and abducts your children. 16,200 children. So if Russia wants any special attitude from the world towards itself, then the only special attitude imaginable is a special tribunal to get a hold of those accountable for Russian war crimes. As NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe goes on, there has been little attempt to explain what NATO was and is all about. Perhaps a glance into history can be a guide. Established in 1949 as military alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was the capstone of a policy led and funded by the United States to contain and circle Soviet and communist power in Eastern Europe, prevent powerful communist parties in France and Italy from winning out and secure, and eventually rearm the new West German state, which was brought into the alliance in the mid-1950s, leading the Soviets to counter with their own formal military alliance, the Warsaw Treaty. In the 1950s, NATO extended the encirclement of the Soviets by including Turkey, neither a North Atlantic state nor a liberal democracy. So for the US, NATO was the first peacetime EU-US commitment to fight abroad as a part of a coordinated multinational alliance and a major user of a multi-trillion-dollar US defense expenditures in the post-war period. And for the US and Europe, what NATO means for all of us today. And for the US and Europe, what NATO means for all of us today. NATO's door remains open to any European country in a position to undertake the commitments and obligations of membership and contribute to security in the Euro-Atlantic area. Since 1949, NATO's membership has increased from 12 to 31 countries through 9 rounds of enlargement. Finland became the latest country to join the alliance on 4th April 2023. Currently, 4 partner countries have declared their aspirations to NATO membership: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, Sweden and Ukraine. Finland and Sweden completed accession talks, and allies signed the accession protocols for both countries in July 2022. While Finland has now joined the alliance, Sweden is an official invitee and attends NATO meetings as such. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has highlighted that NATO's priority is for Sweden's accession to be completed as soon as possible, just as well. NATO's open door policy is based on Article 10 of its founding treaty. Any decision to invite a new country to join the alliance is taken by the North Atlantic Council on the basis of consensus among all allies. No third country has a say in such deliberations. NATO's ongoing enlargement process possesses no threat to any country. Obviously, the more countries are in the alliance, the more it is aimed at promoting stability and cooperation between them, building a Europe whole and free, united in peace, democracy and common values. Of course, not everyone sees it like that.
We don't have problems with Sweden and Finland like we do with Ukraine. We don't have territorial differences. We don't have anything that can worry us if Finland or Sweden join NATO. If Finland and Sweden wish to, they can join. That's up to them. They can join whatever they want. If military contingents and military infrastructure were deployed there, we would be obliged to respond symmetrically and raise the same threats for those territories where threats has arisen for us.
Well, of course. I will give you this hard thing in easy terms. Mr. Putin needs NATO as no one else on this planet. NATO is a garden scarecrow for him that Putin is using to intimidate his not the most far-sighted electorate who are inclined to accept economic decline, repression, political assassinations, theft and war of Putin's Russia as an index of Putin's stability. And NATO needs Putin just as well. No one in the world has ever done more so for NATO to expand but Vladimir Putin. Following Putin's Russia full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the Finnish and Swedish ambassadors to NATO simultaneously convened the intent of their respective countries to join the alliance by submitting official letters of application to NATO. They completed accession talks on 4th of July, as I said, and their accession protocols were signed by allies. Finland is now a NATO ally as of 4th of April 2023. Once allies have ratified the accession protocols according to their national procedures, Sweden will be invited to accede the Washington Treaty and officially became a NATO ally as well. I think that NATO should be giving a medal to Vladimir Putin for Russia's unswerving commitment to the ideals of destruction, annihilation, military intervention, and the affairs of other countries under all sorts of falsified pretexts and tossed evidences, because it is helping countries of the world to understand, on the example of us, Ukraine, that NATO expansion provides them with protection from the deadly and suicidal ambitions of Putin's Soviet Russia.
NATO's position remains unchanged, and that is that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance. At the same time, we all have to understand that the main focus now is to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation in Europe. Because without Ukraine prevailing as a sovereign, independent nation, then, of course, the whole issue of membership will not be relevant. So the first step towards any membership of Ukraine into NATO is to ensure that Ukraine prevails. And that's also the reason why NATO allies and partners have provided unprecedented support for Ukraine, while we continue to do so.
The Economist notices it very well that since Vladimir Putin ordered his tanks across the Ukrainian frontier a year ago, little has gone to plan. Russia's blitzkrieg failed, and the conflict between bogged down in month of grinding stalemate before Ukraine launched successful counteroffensive in the east and south, despite vast amounts of Western military assistance to Ukraine amid the war with Russia. NATO's direct support has been limited to non-lethal aid. And while Kyiv formally requested accelerated accession to join NATO in September last year, the alliance is divided on how to tackle that demand. In the current situation, numerous Western capitals argue that the priority now is helping Ukraine win the war, and that discussion of NATO's political relationship with Kyiv should wait. For example, a senior US official who spoke on condition of course, anonymity with Politico in order to discuss internal alliance dynamics said that America stands by alliance's 2008 decision. But the focus at this point has to be on practical support, says anonymous senior official. And how do we best sustain the security assistance? As Finland's flag was raised in front of its HQs, across the street a group of pro-Ukrainian protesters chanted, "Ukraine in NATO." And while our foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba was more diplomatic, he convened a similar message.
NATO and Ukraine need each other, as simple as that. And while we appreciate the practical support we receive from the alliance, there is no better strategic solution to ensuring strategic security in the Euro-Atlantic region than the membership of Ukraine in the alliance.
If you would have asked me how to break this hard thing into easy terms, I would have answered both Minister Kuleba and anonymous senior American official are right. Ukraine, as a country at war, should be looking for any, and I mean any, practical means of strengthening our defense against Russia's aggression, including a membership in North Atlantic Alliance. However, if the full membership is awaiting us only as a prize of winning this war, then while NATO high officials are looking for a way to tackle our demand, we probably should be making some lemonade of the lemons in our possession and demand for even more practical help from NATO, simply to make sure we survive until the fine Tackle Our Demand Day comes. Volodymyr Zelensky was greeted with the full pomp in Warsaw due a visiting head of state. Complete with military bands and marching soldiers, and the presidential palace in Warsaw, Polish President Andrzej Duda decorated Zelensky with the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's oldest and most prestigious order, for being exemplary leader of the state and the nation. A meeting as such is surely a sign of the weight of the relationship between the two countries. Poland and Ukraine have centuries of tangled ties, often cooperating and sometimes warring against each other. However, Russia's full-scale invasion has made them very, very close allies.
It's a great honor for me to be here today with my wife and to thank the President, his team, the Polish government and every Pole for what you have already done. You have not abandoned Ukraine. You have stood shoulder to shoulder with us, and we are grateful for it. I believe that this is a historical relation, a historic result and a historic strength between our countries.
Volodymyr Zelensky's state visit Wednesday to Warsaw blew up right into a political crisis. Poland's agriculture minister quit on the same day over his inability to cut the amount of Ukrainian agriculture products flooding into the country. Cheaper and soaring Ukrainian imports made the purchase prices for the domestic market drop in half. Farmers' outrage is growing, as the European Commission would not agree to reimpose tariffs and duties on Ukrainian grain imports, a move his ministry has been calling for since December. Despite initial opposition from the country's leadership, Kowalczyk decided to resign.
Since it is very clear that the farmers' basic demand will not be met by the European Commission, I have made a decision and resigned as Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Henryk Kowalczyk, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Poland 2021-2023.
Many say that it casts a shadow of Zelensky's presence in Polish capital. Well, I would like to stress just one thing. There is no light without a shadow, and the contrasting shadowy background of purely economic routine issues between our states that undoubtedly will be resolved, a bright light of mutual cooperation and prosperity is only seen better. Ukraine is open to negotiations and proposals. The help of the Polish nation to Ukraine is hard to overstate. As noticed by Polish government spokesperson Piotr Müller, Zelensky met with Duda to discuss the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, supplying more weapons to Kiev and Ukraine's tighter integration with EU, as well, of course, as the problem of the soaring farm product imports.
We want to conduct these talks in the spirit of thinking about the future. Zelensky choosing Warsaw shows what role we play in international politics today.
Zelensky has been in Poland before, usually in transit to other destinations or in rapid unofficial visits. However, this is his first official trip It is a bare fact Poland has been one of Ukraine's closest and most important allies in the fight against Russia's invasion, pledging key military aid to Kiev and sending some of its Soviet-era MiG-29 fighter jets, the first of which arrived just about days in Ukraine.
4 migi były
4 MiG-29s that remained in storage have been handed over the Ukrainian armed force in recent months. 4 MiGs are now being given, so 8 in total. We are ready, as I told the president, to give 6 more that are currently being prepared. We assume that could be transferred soon. We also have MiG aircraft at our disposal, which have been upgraded to NATO standards. If we are talking first of all about communication and issues related to the implementation of our policy in the mission within NATO, we will need these MiGs for the time being. But when they are released through new aircraft, that will come into our possession, like the Fa-50 from South Korea, as we hope for F-35 aircraft. I am convinced that in the future we will be able to transfer another fleet, our MiG-29s, if necessary.
Zelensky also reiterated his plea for more military aid. The more ammunition we get, the faster we will be able to deal with the situation in Bakhmut and in the entire country, he said, referring to the protracted battle for the eastern Ukrainian city that has been one of the focal points of this war. Both in general and in particular, Zelensky's visit should be taken as a sign of trust and of thanking Poland and Poles for their support. And that is what Zelensky did. He thanked Poland as a state and ordinary Poles for their reception and help for ordinary Ukrainians. After all, Poland has become home to about 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees, the largest amount in Europe. At Zelensky's request, the two presidents held a joint speech at Warsaw Royal Castle.
There is a temptation, fueled by Russian propaganda and disinformation, for a ceasefire as soon as possible at all costs, and consequently to make peace with Russia, which in fact will mean that Russia will take Ukrainian land, which it now occupies. There must be no agreement for that. The politics of appeasing Putin, carried out for years by many European leaders, has borne position fruit.
And as Volodymyr Zelensky says, Russia won't win with Europe when Poles and Ukrainians stand united. We are going to enjoy peace together in everything, in the EU and NATO. Well, what could be added to it? Amen to that. Russian presidency of UN Security Council reignites calls for reform from some members. Russia is a country condemned for violating it all. The United Nations Charter because it invaded Ukraine. The habits of war when it tortures and kills POVs, bombs civilians and critical civilian infrastructure, blackmails the world with nuclear devastation. This entity has officially took over the reins of the UN Security Council on Monday, April 3rd. The presidency rotates every 15 months in accordance with the rules of international law, the one Russia has violated numerous times. The Kremlin has officially presented its new, which is nothing new, of course, foreign policy doctrine with virulent charges against the West, condemned twice by 2/3 of UN member countries for its invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Russia is the first country ever with a president who is the subject of an arrest warrant for war crimes to take the helm of the main body guaranteeing the maintenance of international peace and security.
Take the opportunity again to say, as Russia takes on the presidency of the Security Council, we will use every opportunity to push back on their using their perch in the chair to spread disinformation and to use their chair to push support of their efforts. So it's for that reason today that we have opposed their ARIA formula briefer, a woman who has been charged with war crimes, who has been involved in deporting and removal of children from their homes to Russia. And we strongly are opposed to that, and that's why we've joined the UK in blocking UN Web from being used to allow her to have an international podium to spread disinformation and to try to defend her horrible actions that are taking place in Ukraine.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when a thug comes to your place, rapes your wife, abducts your children, it may be not exactly a wit idea to let this very criminal to be in charge of the investigation process over himself. Maybe it is time for a change within UN Security Council structure that appears rigid, inflexible, and helpless when a thug breaks into the house. And as a cherry on the top, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov supported the idea of reforming the UN Security Council, one of the 6 principal organs of the United Nations. See, even the thug himself believes it is just too much. It is not the UN diplomatic corps is unaware of the public skepticism about Russia leading the council while its troops occupy parts of Ukraine, a fellow UN member country. The council is helpless, being over-regulated and over-restricted by its own regulations and restrictions. A Security Council president is supposed to stay neutral. However, in its new role, Russia can maneuver meetings on Ukraine and use the month to spread a disinformation and lies. And that is exactly the Russian plan is, as they put it themselves.
We are spreading will be spreading, using the presidency to spread disinformation about Ukraine. That's a statement that...
Yeah, that's a statement. Well, no surprise, right? Russia is a country of newly reborn fascism and its Russian version, Russism. Russia is a country whose nation has been turned into population, led by international criminal and delusional power addict and his guarding oligarchic dogs. Russia is a gas station, running on a nuclear power, bragging to destroy the whole world. Russia wanted Kiev for 3 days and can't take Bakhmut for 9 months. The fact that the Security Council of the whole world can't do the same what we in Ukraine do every day, I mean defend itself against a thug, is pitiful and more absurd than Bernard Shaw, George Orwell, Mark Twain and Jerome K. Jerome taken together and multiplied by Lewis Carroll. And underscores the acute necessity for Security Council to change. That is all, folks, for today and this week. It was me, Henry Keane, on UATV channel, doing my best in breaking hard truth into easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Please stay safe and tuned for more. See you soon.